Sports law, probably the only legal subject that when you ask any general lawyer about it, he will tell you, I have no clue. This is the niche area that only the specialists know about and understand all its ins and outs. Today in Monday Legal, we have our guest, Karim Abaza. Welcome, Karim. Good morning.
Morning, Ahmed. Thank you very much for hosting me. It's a big pleasure to be here with you on Monday Legal. One of the very pioneer lawyers, one of the very, I would say, special lawyers that our relationship goes long way back. The founder of Emirates Legal Network, one of the very remarkable and notable, I would say, legal community for all lawyers, as well as the founder of The Jurist, and now on the Monday Legal, a host for a podcast, hosting lawyers. Yeah, I'm really flattered and pleasure to be with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction. I was planning to introduce you. Now you're introducing me.
No,
thank you so much. Karim is the General Counsel of Jazira Sports and Cultural Club. And today we're going to ask Karim our regular first question. What's your coffee?
Mine is espresso.
Okay.
Actually, double espresso with a little bit of hot milk on top.
How many cups of coffee you have every day?
3 to 4.
3 to 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially after the meals, you have to have one it comes with the meal. But the morning, I need at least 2 of them to kickstart my day.
I try to limit myself to 3 a day, but when there are more meetings, there are always more coffee.
Not for lawyers. Exactly. Maybe for an engineer it would work, but for lawyers, especially a lawyer like you, I know you would need a lot of coffee.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. My day is very long, but I enjoy it. I love it. I want to ask you a question. Where did you start with sports law? I would like you to introduce yourself this time. You made a very nice introduction about me. I would like that you make an even better introduction about yourself so that we know where did you start with the law in general and how did you go into sports law?
Sure. It's actually, I'm a little bit camera shy, so that's why I would I hope you don't mind if I just skip certain things. Sometimes I don't maintain eye contact because just of being a camera shy. So simply, I would take it from the professional level. So I've started as a lawyer here in 2008. First, I got my bachelor's of law in English section from Ain Shams University in Egypt in 2007. Started my first legal job with Shalakani law firm here as a legal counsel in 2008 until 2012. Then moved to another law firm, Bin Hazim and Associates, formerly known as Bin Shabib and Associates. And then moved to Dentons & Co. And then done with my private practice time for almost 6 to 7 years. And then moved in-house to United Technologies Corporation, senior legal counsel with 2 different businesses, Otis and Carrier, and then got myself into Otis Elevators business. And then moved to Grohi, the Middle East, which is sanitary ware, bathroom solutions, household, as legal and compliance officer for the region of the Middle East, North Africa, East Mediterranean. And during that time, I've done my master's, completed my master's degree in global sports management and sports law from ISDE Law Business School in Barcelona. I've done this remotely online. And during the pandemic time, I've joined the Jazira Sports and Culture Club as their group senior legal counsel, sports lawyer / board secretary, head of sports affairs. And that was exactly my first sports job, or first job as a lawyer in a sports field, in a sports organization. Despite the fact that Al Jazira Sports and Culture Club is not just only about the football, it's a kind of a holding group that holds under it a number of subsidiaries, the football company, other sports. The football company here means the professional football team, the other sports teams, which is volleyball, basketball, jiu-jitsu, as well as the handball. And also they have an investment arm in capital investments, real estate investments. They have a hotel and hospitality branch, and they do have as well the commercial arm of the group. So this is what I would pinpoint that was my first sports job. But let's go 10 years earlier, a little bit. I'm a football fanatic. I'm a football enthusiast.
This I know.
to an extent that it's very hard to deny it. I started with playing a game. Some people may not believe that story, but I started by playing a game over the PCs called Football Manager game. It's a very boring game for those who are fans of very interesting games or graphics, because it's a statistics games. like kind of a news bar flashing, some dots moving on the screen, but a lot of analysis, a lot of numbers. And I became addicted to that game. This game is simply, you're managing a football team, you are doing your own roster every season, you're signing players, you're offloading players, you're managing a team, hiring scouts, hiring a sporting director, hiring a coach even, and putting the tactics. The game simply took me over like for 12 to 14 years of playing that game. And the game developed itself as a features to an extent that it became very, very close to reality. So I can claim now, maybe the credit goes to them, that my day in office doesn't look really very much different than my day in the game. Everything in terms of the players, in terms of the statistics, the decisions you have to make, and the game became decision-based. So with the game in one side, with my love to the law and the other side, I decided, okay, I want to do something that really blends both, especially football, which is going to be, we're going to use it a lot today. And when I first started my job with Al Jazira, it gave me that. The access to the football world, the access to the sports world, and it kicked off from that time.
Wow, very interesting. So you actually started with the game.
Yes.
The entertainment side of gaming when we were much younger, that what hooked you up into sports law.
Indeed.
That's very interesting.
And before Al Jazira, I didn't do any transactions related to sports, maybe one, except one transaction. It was involving, also it was remarkable at that time, it's a transaction involving a legend in the football, which is Diego Armando Maradona. I got a chance to meet him, or to see him actually from 4 meters away, but I think I'm trying every day to say that the distance was closer, not 3 meters, 2 meters.
And no one was there. You can say whatever you like.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it was a football talent show, and he was the guest host. He was the main host. It's the first time in the Middle East to have that show.
When was that?
I think 2013, 12 or 13, almost.
He used to live here. I think he was coaching Al Wasl.
He was coaching Al Wasl at that time. And he was the guest host for the show, dealt with his lawyer. I waved to him and he waved to me. So I put it in my CV. Maradona waved back to me. So it was with the hand that he used it for.
Actually, it's a big deal.
It's a big deal, yeah. That's what I told him in the CV. I mean, at the interview with Al Jazira. Do you have any sports experience? Yes, I do. I mean, Maradona waved back to me. So
that's very nice. The switch between jurisdictions, like in Egypt, and then you move to the UAE, and the switch between private practice into in-house in completely different field than sports law, and then jumping into sports law after the pandemic with Al Jazira. How did that happen? I mean, I've been a corporate lawyer in private practice all my life.
Yeah.
That's what I do. That's what I know.
Yeah.
I didn't try anything else. I think it's very remarkable that you can switch between these professions. And tell me about it. What was your experience?
It's, I would say it wasn't that easy, but at the same time, it's prompt. Because, in our field as lawyers, the key asset for you is the learning. So from a job to a job, from private practice to in-house, the key motive for you here is what you're going to learn here, what you're going to learn there. If you're sitting at the private practice side, you're advising a client who comes to you asking for a certain advice. When you're advising as an in-house counsel, you switch the table seat. You just sit inside the business and you start advising about, or you start giving the advice from your knowledge of how the business is operating. So it depends on the level of information you have. As a private practice lawyer, you can, as we all know, you can give an advice subject to a lot of caveats, disclaimers, and the clients need to really find out their comfort zone, how to apply it. At the same time, maybe you would know the client more, and you would give him better advice than his in-house, since you are neutral. You don't have any kind of influence.
Yes.
In-house for me was more favorable because I thought at that time that it would give me the comfort, little bit in terms of the timelines, in terms of the work-life balance.
Less. It's one client, it's not 100.
Exactly.
It's one line of business. No.
10 years later, I discovered that it's not the case, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's not very work-life balance friendly. I mean, you really have to exhaust a lot of time in order to support your client because you're available for them. And I think it's also the same thing for private practice lawyers. Between corporates and governance and commercial to the sports, it's not a very big distance to cover. because again, the sports as a sports, when the people ask about it, they think it's okay, that's the game that we see on Monday or we see on over the weekend, the players, the jerseys and everything. But behind the TV, there is a whole world which is also formed of corporate governance, compliance, commercial, labor, intellectual property, everything. And the football or the sports industry itself developed itself in a certain manner that it became a very regulated business. So the presence of lawyers and financiers and HR, support functions, is really vital for the sustainability and even for the operations, for the day-to-day operations. Again, for the sake of knowing much more about the sports, you can just check how many regulations are applicable on each sport. So for the football business, for example, or for the football world, you've got jurisdictions going down from the FIFA to the Asian Confederation, to the UAE Federation, even sometimes to the club group of, the club or the club policies and regulations, and then down to the contracts. So it's a very regulated, I would say, behavior or very regulated medium of business that you really need to follow. You need to follow everything. And also, definitely, to support the sports industry, you would need the commercial arms. So this is also, or you need the commercial revenues. So this is where also lawyers are needed. So you need to advise your business on how to commercialize this sport in order to generate revenue, have a revenue streamline, and get an income for
then
the
it comes
for the sports.
Media contracts, and it comes the advertising and the merchandise and all of this.
It started as a very, I would say, very basic business, and at the time, I think by now, it became like a very regulated business, very profitable, very, I would say, very investment attractive for a lot of investors that they know how to capitalize and they would know how to make money out of it, as well as make profits on a sustainable basis. The only thing which is still behind a little bit around the world is how can the clubs try, or how can especially in the football world, how can they make themselves self-sustainable more and to rationalize their expenditures and guarantee some good return on investment. Because it's all about the performance of the players.
Yeah, this is something I noticed, that the whole Middle East right now is investing so much into sports.
True.
In Egypt, it's really booming. In Saudi, as we all know, they have invested so much into sports. The UAE as well.
True.
I think Saudi and the UAE have invested the most in the Middle East.
True.
Saudi invested in their own league by buying a lot of players and coaches and developed the football inside. Also, Egypt did the same. Here in the UAE, they invested abroad a lot. I mean, the league, of course, have developed here very much compared to 10, 15 years ago. But at the same time, you find a lot of investment holding companies here, let's say, own UK or teams in France and teams abroad.
Indeed.
How do you see the direction of the UAE in general into sports? Are they going to invest more outside or going to invest here more?
Yeah. I think also Qatar cannot be excluded from the equation.
Absolutely. I'm sorry to miss up. I'm sorry.
Got a lot of good Qatari clients over there. Honestly, everyone understood that the sports, it's, again, what would be the best module to benchmark with when you're looking at sports is the entertainment business. It's an entertainment venue that attracts a lot of fans, attracts a lot of sales to merchandise, to tickets, and even it helps you to develop a lot of other industries. You're talking about the transportation, the merchandise, the food and beverages, everything, lawyers, business, everything. So it's a big anchor for business. And when the UAE comes to the picture, they definitely know that the sports in the UAE here occupies a big portion of the people lifestyle as well as interest, because you have, it's a hub for multi-nationalities, and you will find people coming from different backgrounds and coming from different places where they really are used to watch football every weekend. Like if we take the Premier League, for example, the league in England, in the UK, it's one of the most profitable businesses, maybe I would say, ever. I'm not sure how much the number is, but you can see that a game that had been played between the team that occupies the last place and the pre-last place, and the stadium is full. So you can imagine how much businesses have been, I would say, living on that, how much businesses have been benefiting from this. Not just only the clubs themselves. Even the game has been broadcasted, and their TV rights been paid here and there. Commercials have been done here and there. So definitely UAE, they know how to factor that into a proper investment. And I agree with you. A lot of investment companies here around the UAE, they started directing their focus on, and even in Saudi as well, who just acquired Newcastle, one of the very prestigious clubs in the Premier League. You can see that the purpose is not just only from a prestigious perspective. I'm not going to say that I own a football club in the UK just for the sake of making it.
No, they're actually making good profits.
Exactly, and it's a very good investment hub. Maybe 20 years back, the main profit from the football business, mainly from the sports, I would take the football as it's the most sound example, was coming from the sales, transfer of players, I would say, offloading of the players. But that's not the case anymore. This became like, in the balance sheet of the clubs, it became like, I would say, could represent 30, 40%, but this is not the guaranteed money that you guarantee for the investors when they try to invest in the club. The other things associated with that, the facilities use, the merchandise, the sales, the publicity, as well as the other associated investments. Like, I'll give you a small example. One club, they decided to launch a full hub, full e-gaming hub around their stadium. So even if you don't have a seat inside the stadium, you would still be able to watch the game via VR. And they're selling the ticket for that equivalent to the price of the ticket inside the stadium. So they're using the stadium as an anchor. And Real Madrid, when they've done their renovations in Santiago Bernabeu, they simply changed the use of the facility itself, not just only from a football pitch. It became a multi-purpose, and it can be changed in a day from a football pitch to a rugby pitch, to also to what we call it, concerts pitch, everything.
Yeah.
So definitely, if you're an investor, and definitely you need to be a good investor, with good cash on the table and willing to take a long-term investment, definitely sports is your work. You can see also here in the UAE, they've done significant investments in sports like the paddle tennis, and jiu-jitsu. Even when it comes to sports that are not very well commonly known, like the speedboats, like the formula. So it is somehow a very innovative way of, okay, I need to make an entertainment business work. I mean, make it more entertaining, and at the same time, I need to get my revenue back, or need to get my investment return. So I think, and Saudis, as you said, investments they've done into the league over there, they raised the value for the league, I think, by maybe 50 to 60% of the actual value. Saudi enjoys, I would say, a better advantage over Qatar, maybe in the UAE, because of the population.
Yes.
But Qatar, as everyone saw during the World Cup, they managed to make a World Cup which cannot be matched. Hopefully, one day, UAE, with the capabilities they do have over here, I'm sure they would be hosting a fantastic World Cup one day, because they have already done major events, and they're not very far away from that, to be honest.
No, I think from the abilities, the UAE probably is more ready than any other country in the Middle East to host a World Cup. It could be just an event. I mean, one of the things that the UAE can do is not a big deal. And I think just getting the event itself is the thing. Karim, can you tell us a little bit about what do you actually do in these sports contracts? What does it include? Do you handle the contracts between the players and the club, or the other contracts that you handle as well? I imagine there are many, but I would like to know from you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know from where to start, but definitely let's take the football side as well. So the contract between the player and between the club, which is, I would represent the club in that case. The player is simply signing some sort of an employment contract, similar to the employment contract signed anywhere in the UAE, however, with a very specific clauses to complying with the regulations governing the football business specific, or the football industry itself. So the clause or the contract as a contract, to include all of the standard clauses that we do have: a duration, term, salary, notice period, everything. And then you've got the contract between the clubs. So because if you're acquiring a player from another club or even loaning a player or offloading a player, you need to have a contract signed. And all of those contracts, even the contract for the player, the contract for the club, and the contract with the agent that brought that player, or the agent representing the club, because the FIFA, they've got a regulation which is governing the FIFA, which is governing the agents, the football agents specifically, that they need to be representing the player or the club. So 3 types of contracts when it comes to any transaction. All those 3 contracts need to be uploaded on the FIFA TMS, which is the transfer matching system, where really FIFA has to look through it and approve the transaction. So it's a very regulated process. And then you've got also the sponsorship contracts, which are usually signed between the club and between the sponsors, between the private businesses that would like to invest more into the sponsorship. They would like to buy the back of shirt, the front of shirt for the full season, or even sometimes they would like to feature their name around the facility when you have their names on the signboard, on the LED screens, even on the sometimes on some of the private I would say merch for the players. So for example, you might find a player who prefers to wear a certain perfume. So the player himself, he would sign a sponsorship. Sometimes the players, they approach us in order to help them with that. And even the club, sometimes they do it for the players as a good incentive for them. And then you've got all of the other associated contracts with respect to the sports itself. So the venue leasing, I mean, if you're leasing a venue or if you're leasing a stadium to a third party, there's a contract, there's a contract involved. When you are offloading, I would say, we talked about the offloading. When you talk about certain services that are supporting the football. So if you are going to ask a certain person to travel like to another country to watch a player for you, that's called a scouting contract.
Yeah.
So service providers as well. And then you've got all of the other standard contracts that we know, which is simply the maintenance of the pitch, maintenance of the stadium, facility management, employment contracts with the staff. I mean, like any other business.
Yeah.
But in the sports specifically, the 2 significant ones are the football transactions and the sponsorships, because they are in the core of the football business or in the sports business in general.
I saw in your answer a few words that I would like to ask. You have the players, you have the scouts, you have the agents, and you have the lawyers. There's a lot of people involved.
Yeah.
And when you said that they are regulated, each one of them have separate regulations, and for them as a professional, do they have a register, for example, that they register as a scout, and where does this register fall?
Yeah, so definitely they are. So if we take the players themselves, now the FIFA, they launched something called the FIFA ID. So each player has his own unique ID. And this ID is linked to his electronic passport, which is not the personal passport. It's called the electronic player passport. So the player cannot move from a club to a club without using that passport, which has all the clubs he trained at, all the places, when he was first registered, what was his previous club, but it doesn't include a lot of financial information about the player, how much he used to earn.
So it's like a professional background.
It's a professional background of the player. And also the player, if he is going to get transferred from a club to a club, this has to happen through the same regulated process. It has to happen from a club which is registered with as a professional club or maybe as an amateur club in any of the divisions. And if it involves an international dimension, so the player is transferred from a country to a country, this has to go through another platform with its own set of regulations. So, and the clubs have to get, if a club actually is in a certain way, would like to do such kind of transactions, they need to make sure they are having the license to the professional license every season in order to be able to or enabled to transfer a player. And you have to pay all the dues, all the payments, everything overdue, nothing outstanding. Otherwise, you might get because some of the clubs, they might have a transfer ban. So yes, so when it comes to the clubs is the first stakeholder that needs to be heavily regulated, and they are heavily regulated by the FIFA regulations and by the confederations, by the Continental Confederation that is managing that area. So for example, in Egypt, the CAF, which is the African Confederation, Football Confederation, is managing the entire continent, entire Africa. And then under that, they have the level which is called the Local Football Association.
Yes.
Here in the UAE, they've got the UAE Football Association as well. They represent the FIFA jurisdiction in the UAE. When it comes to the Asian Confederation, the jurisdiction over the clubs has been managed and regulated here by something called the UAE Professional League Association, which is the association managing the professional league. And this is the body that gives you the licensing every season to compete. Without that license, which is again another level of compliance between audit, governance, legal, sports, facilities, security, media, name it. It's a manual that gets issued every year. The club has to be fully compliant in order to get the license to play in the professional league. Asians, of course, the Asians, they are the very important stakeholder because they represent the clubs when it comes to or represent the players when it comes to acquiring a player by a club. And they have to be now registered by the FIFA through a certain platform. They have to sit for an exam, like the bar exam. And this, they have to get certain credit points. And they have to make this kind of reporting on a regular basis to the FIFA on the transactions they do. Scouts, I don't think there is anything that is regulating scouts as a scout. However, the technical qualifications in order for you to pay any or to get any scout, you need to be technically qualified to do that. So a lot of people,
their activities must be regulated contractually.
Contractually, and the scout himself, in order to be able to be paid as a scout, you don't need to go through the FIFA regulations, but again, you would go through the local regulations here. So this scout has to be like having a license in the UAE, for example, to do some kind of football consultancy business.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you try to pay a person who just says, I saw that player, you won't have any money left. Because everyone sees a good player somewhere.
Yeah.
You've got also the other part, which is the coaches, which is very important.
Yes.
3-4 years back, coaches were never regulated under the FIFA regulation, or were not properly regulated under the FIFA regulations. The coach was just having an employment contract like any employee. However, the nature of his business mandates stability, a certain level of stability. So the FIFA, they enacted a new regulation, also protecting the coaches and the relationship between the clubs and between the coaches. So it's a very, as I told you, it's a very regulated behavior. It looks simple on the TV, but honestly speaking, at the backside, it's quite complex.
This is amazing. I mean, from what you're saying, it looks like it's really very regulated, and it's very organized.
Indeed.
Why do we always read about a player signing for 2 clubs, a coach that take a flight ticket and never come back, and I don't know, someone sign a player and then they come to the club and realize it's a different guy. I mean, I heard all the horrific stories in Africa in general, if not in Egypt, and I heard here as well, and it happens in Europe, it happens everywhere. If it's so regulated, why is this happening?
I mean, the regulation is the rule. I mean, it doesn't mean that when you have the rule, you won't have people to try to, not to cheat the rule, but try to, I would say, find the safe zone under the law or under the rule to act. Again, it's not illegal, because those regulations, I think, Ahmed, I would need to give you a little bit of more dates, but I don't have any, but those regulations are developing over the years.
Yeah.
So when I talk about a coach regulation, FIFA, they thought about the coach to put him in a code, or to put some kind of regulations to help that coach to have a stable contract 4 or 5 years back. But the coaches have been in the game for like 60, 70, 80 years. So this is actually kind of, they don't learn by trial and error, but to a big extent, there's a lot of examples and modules that are not regulated even, or they are regulated, but the regulation is very gray, and you leave it to the jurisprudence, you leave it to the interpretation of the regulatory bodies themselves. So, like, for example, we'll take an example in Egypt. We actually did sports, the football business, or the football news in Egypt is specifically, I think it occupies huge attention of people. Absolutely. Especially when it's involving the 2 big pollers. By the way, I'm a fan of Al Ahly club, a very historical fan.
Can't blame you, of course.
So honestly, if you see like a player from Al Ahly, he's not turning up to training, you will see it all over the news. But at the backside, what happens with the club and the player? The player has a disciplinary policy that he signs upon. He needs to sign it. And it has penalties, like an employee. So he's an employee, but with a specific nature. If an employee moves from a company to a company, without settling his dues or without getting paid his end of service benefits or even any payments, then he has the right to sue that former employer, which is the same thing. When an employee leaves a company without canceling his visa, without settling his papers with that company, and he goes to another company, then you would definitely have some kind of disciplinary actions involved. So this is where it comes from if we look at it as lawyers. On the media side, you would definitely see that the media is trying to fuel it up because it's very interesting. It involves a lot of insights, a lot of paparazzi being involved.
Viewership numbers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we saw that player training that night with that club. It doesn't mean that he signed. And you will find a huge fan base that would follow that. They would go and they would do the search. They would find the information. Most probably, we have the biggest numbers of football analysts around the world. It's in Egypt. And most of them, they are actually, they are video bloggers. So everyone has an opinion in football. And that's a curse. The part which is, how can you resolve it as a club? How can you resolve it as a player or as a regulatory body? It's simple. Put enough terms in the contract, self-explanatory. Make sure that the player reads the regulations well, the club knows the regulations well, hire good lawyers, whether at both sides, and then whenever they put the conditions clear without any kind of vagueness, you would leave a very little room for interpretation for the parties. You would be also, I would say, you would be not surprised, but you cannot imagine the process itself. If a player just got himself into that trouble, what would be the consequences, or the club even? The player could be banned from practicing football. He could be banned from being transferred. He could lose money. Clubs themselves, they can lose transfer fees that they've paid, or even get themselves banned from transferring players. Sometimes they lose points. And in that world, if you lose points, you lose sponsors. If you lose sponsors and you lose money, you lose interest as well. If you go to the second division, the money that you receive or the revenues you receive for the broadcasting goes down. So it's all correlated.
So
it's a domino effect.
Yeah.
And Egypt, there is a big fight between Zamalek and Al Ahly over one player. Okay, and this player, he likes to simply have this fight on air all the time because it will increase his value. So even the players, they utilize it in a certain way to raise their margins a little bit when it comes to the negotiation. And the clubs, they do it as well because it's part of the beauty of the game. You were supposed to sign that player for 1 million, but as a club, as your opponent, your direct rival, I made you sign him for 3. Why? Because I know that when you sign that player for 3, you won't sign another player because your budget is 5. So the clubs keep doing those gimmicks all the time. They play together, even with the players themselves. It's interesting, but it involves a lot of money.
And I think it involves a lot of work in the back end as well with all the contracts. And this takes me to another question to you. We've seen a lot of pressure from the media on the decision makers in football clubs and sports facilities in general when it comes to behavior or legal liability of one of the players outside, because the private life of sportsmen can put them in trouble, as he said. Someone is sued for whatever reason, someone is involved in I don't know, igniting a media controversy, and does the sports contracts for players regulate that part, what they do in their private life as well? Because it does affect the club. It does affect your the profitability of the game or the legal aspects of the contract. Do you put terms in the contract to regulate this part?
Yeah, big time. We definitely try to draw the thin line between the private life of the player and between the professional life as a footballer. But again, both are linked in a certain way. If a player is actually is drinking, or he's simply consuming drugs, or he's not fit enough because he's been spending a very long hours at his nightlife. Again, if he doesn't show up in the training, penalties will apply. If this continues, the club may have even a higher level of disciplinary actions, which is up to the termination of the contract, and also termination of the contract for something called for just cause. The most important thing is to make sure that the player has been called, he's been heard, he has the right to appeal any decision, But again, yes, the clubs, they do protect, because the athlete, again, he didn't sign to be available with the club 24/7, but his lifestyle and his mandates requires him to be fit, to be healthy, to turn up to the training ready to train, which is the obligations that he should have. And if he's under the influence of any drugs or alcohol during the training, it's definitely a big issue for the players. Some of the players, they even go further and beyond. They get themselves involved in more worse issues, like harassment, like rape.
Yeah.
And you've seen many examples of that most recently, even in Europe. Again, the clubs, they protected themselves by putting clauses in there, by saying that, okay, if the player is been convicted for with a criminal conviction for doing something, that would defame the club or impair the image of the club or impair the name of the club, definitely I have the right to protect myself and terminate the contract and even seek damages from the player. And this is very common. Some of the players, again, because of the way of living in a certain way, they end up their careers very early. So you find a player who was top of the Premier League, and I don't like to use names, but I've seen players really earning very, very prestigious and very good money in the Premier League, and then you find them playing in second division somewhere in a country that you barely heard of, simply because the clubs don't like troublemakers. I want my 22 or my 25 players in the squad room to be proper athletes, even in any other sports, even in the UFC. You see them doing the martial arts. You see them facing each other, and they're trying to ignite the fans by showing that there is a big rivalry, and they can. But again, this is for the sake of the show. But when it comes to the sportsmanship behind the scenes, they definitely know that anything that they would do that would, violate the regulations or violate what they signed for, they know that they will be liable for huge compensations. Like what happened between the very famous fight between McGregor and between Khabib, when Khabib left the cage and he jumped over there. No one knows how much Khabib was fined. Everyone knows that he was going to lose the belt in that game, but no one knows how much he was fined. He made other money later on because of this rivalry, but at the same time, no, he violated the cage regulations. So in each and every aspect around the corner, you will find a lawyer with a regulation, and he's simply trying to enforce it in a certain way. The smart way of making sure the players or the athletes themselves to go into the line by simplifying it and making it customized in a certain way, to an extent, of course, that it's easy to follow and it's hard to break. So an athlete that comes to you every morning and you know that he's not running well, you just need to take him for a BMI test to see how much does he have as a fat rate. And you mark a target for him. If you're not going to lose that fat within that much of time, you're not going to be ready for the competition, you will lose money. So the player will fall in line because he knows that I would lose my contract if I don't do that.
Karim, I'm enjoying the conversation very much with you, and I think I'm learning a lot, and this will take me to the next question. We've been talking about the professional players and the football clubs on a bigger level, but does the sports law regulate the sports facilities as well? Because, for example, you're representing Al Jazira Sports and Cultural Club. What about the common people, the users of the facilities? What is the liability of the facilities or the liabilities of the common users toward each other if something wrong happened, if one of the users of the sports facility abuse the location and do something wrong in it or damage the facility, and the other way around? What's the responsibilities of the sports facility towards its members?
It's a very, very important question, Ahmed. Really, it's a very, very well thought of question, to be honest. And again, I would break it into two parts. So, for example, if we take a private facility like a gym, if someone is going to the gym, he signed terms and conditions, goes into that facility, and something wrong happens to him at that facility. A machine broke down, something that caused him damages. Usually in those terms and conditions, you will find something called that you're training here on your own responsibility. However, this facility would never get any kind of license or a permit to operate without making sure that they have a public damage, or we call it a public indemnity insurance, and even individual insurance. And they would never be able to operate. So they've got maybe third-party insurance, comprehensive insurance against the normal risks, but they will also have the personal indemnity insurance because they are operating a facility that involves interaction between people and machines. However, at the same time, again, you need to see what you've signed for. You may find like kind of a waiver from your side that you would not claim any, you would simply waive all your rights with respect to claiming any personal liability if you did not follow the rules. So if someone likes to deadlift with 250 kg, which is, I know people doing that, I was doing this till to a certain point, again, and he breaks his back, the facility cannot be responsible. The facility would tell him simply, you're training at your own responsibility, at your own risk. But if someone is just walking around the gym and something wrong happens, a machine just breaks down, and it cost him, like, you know, it caused him kind of a
severe injury
or something, they would definitely have the liability to treat the person. They have their own facilities with the first aid kit, next hospital, they have a protocol. And here in the UAE specifically, whether it comes to Dubai Sports Council, Abu Dhabi Sports Council, even Sharjah Sports Council, the rules and regulations with respect to that, as well, in addition to the rules of the regulations of the corporate bodies here, the Department of Economic Development, the municipality, are very, very strict. When it comes to the other side of the facility itself, so let's, for example, take the stadium. If a fan is going into a stadium to watch a football game, it's an entertainment venue that has rules and conditions, terms and conditions. And when you buy that ticket, you agree to abide by those.
Absolutely.
If the fan simply decides to leave the fans pit and to jump inside the pitch, and then he get injured over there, then he simply broke the rule, and he caused himself, as if that the person, he I would say deliberately decided to get injured, because you're not supposed to be on the pitch.
So it's like getting out of the system guarantees that you don't get protection.
Exactly. And also as well, those facilities, the stadiums, for example, the set of regulations when it comes to civil defense, when it comes to security, when it comes to health and safety, when it comes to the way you are putting things, even when you put the bottle of water, if you put a bottle of water somewhere, you might get violated. You may get fined for it. Not violated, but you will get a big fine for it.
Yeah.
If the non-authorized people are having access to certain places, then you get fined as well. So it all depends on what you're signing on. Read the terms and conditions. Make sure that you check the facility before you go. And at the same time as well, the facility or the owners of the facility or whoever is running it, as a gym, for example, they have to compensate in a certain way the person who gets an injury due to their default. So again, you will go back to the same concept that we all know of liability and tort.
Who's responsible?
Who's responsible?
Yeah.
So you'll go to the tort law, who's responsible, who did the mistake that consumed the other person. Again, as it is here. One last thing also, what about a football player? You signed up a player for I would say, a number of millions, and the player just comes to you and he gets injured. How would the club simply be able to escape that loss? Because you've paid him already.
Yeah.
And he got injured due to a reason related to work. Maybe he gets injured due to a reason of speeding up outside of the training because he's driving his Lambo and he decides to speed up, so he made an accident. Again, here you would draw the line. Whose fault it is? Is it the player simply doing this on a personal status? Maybe he's driving his Lambo and he lost the balance and he's on the way to the training. This even makes it more interesting. Simply the club could cover up, because all of those professional players, they need to be insured. You need to insure them against any kind of injury that happens to the player, any kind of something, or I would say a damage that happens to the health of the player, or the player is not available to feature with you for a certain number of games during the season. Insurance can cover part of the salary. but they cannot cover the full salary because some clubs, they really go crazy with what they sign and what they pay for the players, but they cover part of it. But again, you have to draw the line between whether it's something that happened due to a personal fault from the player side, or it's something related to the business or the work itself. Like us, when we're going to work and God forbid something happens, I'm insured because I'm insured by my work in order to get treated for that. But if it's for a misconduct from my side,
then the insurance
nothing covers
doesn't apply. What about occasions when we see players get injured in the game that affects their life? For example, that affects their health performance for a while. We've seen, or even, I don't know, we have an example of some players who are not able, still young and injured, and they're not able to continue into sport again. What is the liability within the framework if the player did nothing wrong and he's just doing the sport and he got injured or sick during the time he is with the club? What is liability of the club to protect the player or to take care of his medical expenses, for example?
Yeah, definitely. That's another. You're getting more deeper into sports, Ahmed, and I'm learning from you now. No, actually, it's a pleasure. Definitely, the insurance that you sign for the players is designed in a certain way to protect them against those risks. So it's not like the standard health insurance that anyone signs. You have to have a professional insurance specifically designed for the players and the nature of their business. Like when you insure people working in oil and gas sites. It's not the standard insurance, and it's specific companies are willing to take that risk for the sake of getting paid that much in terms of the premium that you pay, because those are very expensive insurance policies compared to the normal ones. Of course, the club, they have the liability or the obligation to insure the player with that professional insurance specifically for players. The clubs themselves, according to the regulation, they do have certain, I would say, certain obligation as well to continue paying the player his salary as long as he got injured during the game time or during doing his duty during the training, even not just only the game time, during the training, the rehab, at the gym, at the showers. So they have to continue paying to a certain extent, and because you have a limited term contract, it's not an unlimited, so you have to pay him part of that salary. And then you've got the third part of it, which is simply the player himself. I mean, the player, he do have his own, some of the players, they come with their own personal indemnity, I would say, personal insurances. You sign a superstar, like for example, Neymar. So Neymar, to a big extent, yes, he's insured by Al Hilal, he's got his own insurance and everything, or he's got the insurance of the club, and the contract is clear about that, he's protected by FIFA regulations. But do not rule out the fact that he's a superstar and he goes on private jets all the time. He's traveling from a country to a country. He's a celebrity in football. So he would definitely find him having his own personal insurance. So the player is covered at the three aspects. And definitely with the enhancements the clubs and the regulators mandate the clubs right now to put on the facilities, and even when it comes to the level of care they do put for the players, not just only at the level of the professional, even at the level of the academies. If you're sending your kid to a private school to train, private football school or any private school, and it's licensed, the set of rules and regulations this school has to comply with as an academy or as a school is magnanimous. You cannot imagine how much it is. You need to have a safeguarding officer there. You need to have an ambulance for professional trainings. You need to have an ambulance sometimes when you're running a tournament. And if there is no ambulance, there is no medical services, then simply the game is not going to happen. And sometimes the hosting team, they lose points and they get, I would say, penalized for not making the ambulances available, or for not making having the right preparations for the game. So the healthcare and the well-being of the players, of the athletes, all the way from the grassroots all the way to the top of the professional level, is definitely a big part of the game, and it's mandatory.
I'm going to take you back quickly into contracts again, because and again to football, because that's a very interesting topic to me. We see a lot of players, as you said, 22 players for at least for each team, and you have 22 contracts, and 22 completely different set of articles and regulations.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen players complain, and they have the right to complain, that their peers have different conditions? Especially, I'm saying this especially for the young players who are new into the game, and they get kind of, I'm not going to say cheated, but they're going to be taken for a ride, let's put it in a nice way, by not knowing their rights or their potential, so they get a very bad contract.
Yeah.
Do they have any way out of this, or is there any legal way that they can rely on, or they might be locked for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years with a very bad contract?
Me being representing the club, I won't give the solution. Now, I'll answer you that, and again, thanks a lot, Ahmed, for that question. It's a very important question. A player, when he signs a contract like an employee, as we said, but with a specific nature, even they use the term of a special nature contract. So it's an employment contract. If you sign based on a certain terms and conditions, then you are bound by those conditions, unless some of the conditions or the conditions they are, I would say, contradict with an applicable law or a regulation. So we sign, I don't think it's just only 22, but I mean, you have the roster open for you. Sometimes you can sign up to 30 players, because again, you sign professional players, depends on the season. So 25, 30, depends on the squad room or the squad list you've got every season. If a player signs on a contract and he comes with his peers, same level, and says, okay, but he's signing on that and I'm not signing on that, again, it depends on the terms and conditions and regulations. I might be giving a player an advantage in his contract, but I'm not giving it to his peer. And I might be doing the same thing, because again, it depends. The players are part of the game, they're stakeholders, and the most important stakeholders of the game. Because again, they have to be paid, I won't say fairly, but because also you're bound by certain, I would say, thresholds. So there's something called the salary cap. When it comes even to the local players here, you have to comply with the salary cap. Certain number of players can pay that much, certain number of players could pay that much, and it's regulated, and you have to make sure that this is happening. It's not like, you can move around it in a certain way or try to maneuver it in a certain way. So, but most of the clubs, they've done something very, I would say, very smart. They categorize the players into categories. So you've got a player who's an international player, and he's also featuring for more than 90% of the games every season. He's an important player, he's in a peak age, so this is actually category A. So internally, they put their own regulations to make sure that there is a hedge, or there is a cap, there is a threshold, a minimum and a maximum. And the players, they start moving all the way up the ladder, from that category all the way up to the top category. So this somehow creates the equilibrium between the players. Not the perfect equal system, but it creates this kind of balance. Can a player legally walk out from the contract? No, unless there is a violation. Because again, some of the players in a certain way, they tend to create the situation where the club is simply to abuse in a certain way the clauses of the contract, or to abuse the contract, and the clubs as well do the same. Because again, they are trying to break off a contract that seems to be in its nature unbreakable, but at the same time, both parties need to really consider the merits and the privileges being offered to each of them by the regulator. Under the FIFA regulations, for example, if you terminated the contract of a player prematurely for an unjust cause, which is also equivalent to what we know in the labor law as arbitral dismissal, then definitely, if the player done so for an unjust cause, or the club, then the party which is the damaged party, or the other party, not the non-defaulting, need to compensate the other, maybe even up to the contract, to the end of the contract, or up to the full contract value. So it's serious. Even when you get that example of club trying to take a player for a ride and tell him, you know what, sign on that, and then later we'll do it. Again, the player, he's deliverable to you under that contract as a performance. So I would really consider it very carefully if I go to take a player and say, look, let's do a deal and let's make sure that he signed for that, and I actually be a clever lawyer, because the player is going to pay you back in bad performance. You would pay the player less than what he expected in a certain way, or less than what he signed for. I mean, apart from being cheating the player, or simply violating his rights, his contractual rights, his personal rights, again, you won't get the performance. You cannot force a player, one of the to score. And one of the very, very important things that the people sometimes miss, if you're Zinedine Zidane at the World Cup and he didn't score that penalty against Italy, people think that the federation, or even if he's doing that with a team, that the team can punish him. Not possible. This is the only area, unless he commits a misconduct, but this is the only area in the football which is the players are totally privileged and protected. And even no matter how the clubs or the coaches, they try to put as much as they can of influence on the players, that if you don't score, if you don't pass, if you don't listen to the coach instructions from the outside, we will penalize you. It's a very risky area to go. However, technology came here to help them out. So a player needs to wear a GPS device. He's a defender, or he's a right winger, or he's a striker. You know what? You've got a minimum number of kilometers you need to do or minimum distance that you need to cover every game or every training. Your weight need to be perfect. Your jump height, I think in a certain way, we know that you're doing 2 meters. If you're doing less, then there's something wrong. We take you to the clinic. So it became also less abusive from both sides.
Okay. Can you mention in a contract that a player have to score a number of goals, otherwise he will be in default? No, that's not possible.
Cannot. Because it's a factor, it depends on other factors.
Yes.
But if the player comes to you and say, look, I need to play at least 50% of the games of the season to guarantee that, and you agreed on it, if he plays less than 50, you give him a reason to terminate the contract. Even for the club, if the club asks the player, and that's an important clause, a player cannot come and say, I'm retiring from football today. You know what, I'm not going to continue. Because you can still put a clause in the contract, despite that it raised some controversials earlier during the days that a player, it's against his personal rights to force him to play. But yeah, it's a contract. He has to respect it. So you will find a lot of those gray areas where really lawyers and scholars and people who studied law or advising sports law, they just tap in, they plug themselves into that and they start doing the interpretation. And Court of Arbitration for sports, the CAS, is, I would say, the most important jurisprudence here. If they rule on one case with a certain ruling, then this becomes like when you do it with the Court of Cassation. It's like kind of the top level, and it could be hardly challenged.
Yeah, as a precedent.
Yeah.
In our audience, we have a lot of legal students and a lot of fresh grads and a lot of people who are starting their career, and I'm pretty sure they would like to learn from you. How would they become a sports lawyer? How can they pursue this career if someone is interested?
Thank you for the question.
Please, we want the recipe.
It's actually, the thing is that the sports law, like maybe a few years back, I won't say a long time back, but there was a very limited ways of getting access to the sports field. And people they feel that they're debarred from going into the sports field because they don't know the way. Should I apply to a club? Should I actually study law? Should I sit with footballers? Should I sit with agents? They don't know the thing. And the solution was found by academics first. So since a long time back, you've got lawyers who got themselves involved in sports because they love it and they learn it by practice. So this is actually like kind of a segment. And then the academics, a lot of universities, they launched their own programs which are specifically talking about sports. And they make it as a master's program, specialized diplomas. Even sometimes it's a 1-week course to that extent, and it really gives a lot of access to information, regulations, and even to the network itself. You've got even universities that gives bachelors now in sports management and in sports law. FIFA themselves, they have their own specialized program, which is mainly in football law. The Court of Arbitration for Sports, they've launching their modules as well to grasp a bigger number of talents and of lawyers to get in there and study what is the regulation and how to apply it. So you can have that also as a second segment. The most important segment is the practice. I told you I started my career with one transaction that came just, I would say, was not planned, just came my way. representing like a legend, or simply working with a legend like Diego Armando Maradona, rest in peace, on one contract. I also have done another contract with Fabio Cannavaro, the World Cup winner, with his imaging rights. I never knew what to put in that contract. So the research is the key. If I'm going to research the regulations, if I read them, and if I need to find templates somewhere, if I need to meet up with people, the network of the people working in sports is very open, because again, it used to be very limited. Nowadays, it's you cannot imagine, the number is unprecedented. Maybe in the UAE, I'm still lucky so far that the network is not that
so big.
But definitely there are people, I would say I'm one of the very recent lawyers who came into the sports law. There are better lawyers and more advanced, I would say also more knowledgeable key lawyers in the region, even in the UAE here. Shout out to all my colleagues at the Pro League and at the UAE Football Association, the clubs, my colleagues at the club who I learned a lot from them. I came to them as the most unexperienced sports lawyer, and because of everyone's contribution, I was able to make a little bit of progress. So definitely those three segments, you can simply start by working, getting yourself involved in a sports facility or in a sports organization, not just only football, any other sports that you like, study and research. And by the three factors combined, you would definitely, when you present yourself or when you are present in a network, which is a network involving a lot of sports organizations, clubs, players, there's definitely an opportunity, because the stakeholders in that process is, the number is humongous. You will find no one knows exactly till now, or no one can give you a figure how many football players professionally are registered. So you can imagine if each one of those players need a lawyer, how many lawyers it would need, and the clubs itself. So yeah, definitely it's very important. And again, me being pleasured and honored to be part of Emirates Legal Network, this niche community with the prestigious lawyers, I'm available to help anyone with an advice if they need to ask any advice about it. And again, I'm sure there would be many other more lawyers interested as well to help.
Absolutely, thank you so much. You know, usually I end the conversation with most lawyers to ask them, do you really love your job? But for you, I know, I can see how much you're enjoying being the general counsel of Al Jazira Sports and Cultural Club. Then I will ask you, how much do you love your job?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. My job for me is I would call it, it became my second nature. And this is actually a little bit dangerous. I wake up as a sports lawyer, I sleep as a sports lawyer. You can imagine you do like 8 or 10 good hours at office, and you go back home and the games have been featured for the Champions League, and you're watching 3-4 games. And your favorite team is playing. My team, Al Jazira, they play every weekend. So I'm there present to see them winning or losing or drawing, and I know the consequences of each and every scenario. So there's a very little time for me to think about whether I like it or no, but I think to a big extent. The sports world itself, it occupied me. It stimulated me as a person and as a lawyer. Very exhaustive. It's not that easy because it's still emotionally controlled. But at the same time, as a lawyer, when you see, or as any professional working in sports, your work is simply get presented on TV every weekend. Whatever you're doing, and at the end, maybe at the end of the season, if your team is successful and they are able to make it to the winner's podium, they win trophies or they win silverware, you still know that you took part of that. And if your team is not featuring well, not performing well, even if you have performed or you overperformed, you know that when it comes to the group or when it comes to the collective, I would say collective effort of everyone, that the team is not winning. So definitely, my job is for me something very important. I love it. Despite all the long hours that keeps me away from the family, keeps me away from my lovely 2 kids and my great wife, who's a very important backbone in my life. And she's the big key asset for me that made me at least continue in that career. She was the first encourager to come and tell me, look, you like that, continue in that, and we will support you. I like seeing the passion in your eyes every morning that makes you wake up without an alarm, going to an office, spending 10 or 11 hours with without your kids, sitting behind the PC just to come back at home and feel that I'm doing what I like.
This is beautiful.
Yeah.
This is beautiful. Amazing to know. Can you tell me a little bit about Al Jazeera Sports and Cultural Club, and what is it like to work there?
By all means. Al Jazeera Sports and Culture Club, it's a holding group. So the club itself, it's a sporting governance, I would say sporting organization licensed by the government, by the Ministry of Sports, formerly known as Ministry of Youth and Sports. And as I said, it's a holding group that owns under it a number of subsidiaries: the football team, the other sports, the investment, the hotel. So it's different types of businesses working together. But the ultimate purpose is to promote sports and to promote well-being and health of the youth, involving the community. So it's mainly was founded originally to support and to support the community, I would say well-being and health. Al Jazeera Club is a very unique model, to be honest, very unique. Apart from a lot of clubs, not just only in the UAE, maybe in a different region, their benchmarks are completely quite different. Benchmarks are way much more higher. When they compare themselves, when they want to do something as a club, they really put themselves into the position of, we want to be the best in that. And they look for the best, they ask the best, and they try to do it, as we say, in a very sustainable way. The level of innovation being used, the level of creativity, and the chances, the opportunities they grant to each and every professional inside the club to simply work on himself and help and support the club, is something I would say, after working with a number of companies, I've never saw it anywhere before. The talent pool, the enthusiasm around it. You don't see employees turning up to work on a Saturday or a Saturday or a Sunday or over the weekend just because the manager wants so. And even if the manager is not there, they're still gonna go and do it because they love it. The module and the project of Al Jazeera is very unique to an extent. Not cherished by us and not simply accredited by us, by all of the other remarkable stakeholders around us, that they are the best in class. Al Jazeera is one of the best in class. They've won the licensing accolade number of years consecutively, which is very hard. When I told you about the licensing, it's a set of rules. It's a manual of like 200 and something pages of regulations that you have to comply with. So when you become best in class 2-3 years, it means that the backbone inside and the I would say the governance system and everything is working perfectly. Again, the results do not really say a lot about Al Jazeera, how many trophies you've got, because again, the club is founded, and even when it comes to the other sports, they're founded to support the community. However, the club is working on a very, I would say, unique module to become self-sustainable, to achieve the best that they can do, benchmarking with top organizations around the world, using the best resources, hiring top talents. One of the good things that it's kind of a success story, I'm not going to mention the name, but might be the person who might be watching that. So we usually get interns to work with us. So during the past 3-4 years, I've seen a student coming out from university. He maybe studied a course or two about sports, and he's coming for 3 months or 4 months. You cannot imagine the amount of access that this intern is enabled, and the amount of deliverables he get. We hired interns that I would say that they benefited us more than we did. So he actually came from the outside, taught us something, and helped us to save money or even generate money. And I have sound examples like them, who came as an interns for 3 months, they stayed for 6 months, and then they found themselves with a permanent job, and they are absolutely doing a stunning job. Stunning. You won't find this you won't find this a lot, I would say, in any other place. Al Jazeera gives this room for creativity. I would take myself as an example. Hiring someone at that position as a senior lawyer, without a sports experience, but just with with an academic certificate, is a risk. And giving this person the access and the learning curve and the education pathway, and as well as the empowerment, is something, it's unbelievable. So I definitely would speak highly about Al Jazeera, not because they are an employer, but because of the uniqueness of that module, and because of the strategy, the way the people are thinking, the way they resemble themselves, the way they address their qualities is definitely something that I've not seen it anywhere, and definitely because I love the place. I became a fan. I told my boss one day, I came to this club as an employee. And if one day I will leave it as a fan. And I will leave it as a very, very loyal fan. So yeah, definitely. Shout out to Al Jazira, to my colleagues there, to all my team. Great people, to be honest. And as I told you, I was a student with them, despite the fact I was heading the team, but I was the student with them, the devoted one. And they were always very helpful to support me to get where I am. So definitely it's a great place to work for me, and inshallah it continues.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thank you very much for coming and being with us, Karim.
It's my pleasure, Ahmed. Thank you very much for having me.
We really enjoyed today.
Likewise, to be honest, it's a pleasure. It's a big pleasure to be with you. And as I told you before, I'm following your steps since long time. You know, our relationship goes way much more back. So I saw everything. You saw me when I was an associate.
Yes.
You interviewed me as a role one day as an associate.
Long ago.
So I definitely, I'm definitely highly looking at you. You've done something unprecedented here in the market.
Likewise.
Network and people and the level of experience. You're very notable as a lawyer around the community of the lawyers, and definitely it will continue. I'm sure you will do a lot of great things.
Thank you so much.
So thank you very much for having me today. It's actually a big pleasure, and I'm honored.
Thank you. This is your dose from Monday Legal. See you next week.